Welcome to the Saco City Council meeting for Monday, April 4th, 2022. Call this meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. Recognition of all members present, all councilors are present with the exception of Councilor McPhail, who is excused. Invite you all to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you very much. Brings us to item, there is nothing on the general this evening. Any committee correspondence to council? Councilor Berman?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for the council and the public to know, the School Construction Committee Program Subcommittee met today. We've narrowed it down to 3 potential configurations for Saco's new school, with 1 preferred. We also were updated on the site plan selection. There's still 3 or 4 sites in active consideration. Those are undergoing vernal pool testing and other site-appropriate testing now. Once that is completed, there'll be another public forum in which the final recommendations will be discussed with the public.
Thank you. Any further committee correspondence? Seeing no more committee correspondence, moving on to item 6, public comment. Up first, we have Kelly Archer. And again, if you can just state your name and address for the record.
Hi, everyone. Kelly Archer, 185 Bradley Street. This is for Councilor Berman. On behalf of myself and Save Saco Neighborhoods, we want to thank you very much for reaching out to us and meeting with us last night. It was a very productive meeting. We learned common ground. We learned goals, hopes, frustrations. We really had a wonderful talk, and we do appreciate you reaching out to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If there's anyone else who would like to speak to public comment, please come forward and be heard. Seeing no further public comment, moving on to approval of the minutes for March 21st, 2022. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Councilor Hatch, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Johnston. Any discussion? Any omissions, adds? Roll call vote on approving the minutes. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0. Brings us to item 8, consent items. Confirm mayor's appointments to Coastal Waters Commission of John Safford and Alan Shepard. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Councilor Berman, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Hatch. Any discussion? Roll call vote to approve the consent agenda. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0 to approve the consent agenda. Brings us to item 8 and action items. First, we have item A, accepting the downtown parking study, which was presented to us at the last council meeting, and that is page 3 in your packet, assigned to Councilor Purdy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In August 2021, the City of Saco signed a contract with Stantec to complete a downtown parking study. The purpose of this parking assessment is to gain a comprehensive understanding of downtown Saco's parking inventory and to understand the current parking challenges of the overall network, where they are located, when they are occurring, and the factors contributing to the challenges. Through comprehensive data and analysis, this assessment identifies specific opportunities and solutions for Saco to consider for responding to current parking challenges, as well as preparing for those which may accompany the city's ongoing evolution. On February 16th, 2021, the consultant team presented key findings and recommendations from the final draft of the plan to the Economic Development Commission. At this meeting, the Commission unanimously voted to recommend the Saco City Council adopt the City of Saco Downtown Parking Study in substantially the form as presented. On March 28th, 2022, the Stantec team presented the plan to Council. I move to adopt the City of Saco Downtown Parking Study.
Motion's been made by Councilor Purdy. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Hatch. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0. Brings us to item B, authorization of incremental capital financing, page 4 in your packet, assigned to Councilor Hatch.
Thank you, Mayor Doyle. The authorized purchase of a pumper truck has come in at 1% above the authorized amount in the capital plan for fiscal year 2022. This resolution authorizes the full cost of the fire department pumper truck. Be it ordered that council approve the resolution and declaration of official intent to finance the full cost of the fire department pumper truck at $732,510. I move to approve the order.
Motion's been made by Councilor Hatch. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Johnston. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0. And that brings us to item C, the start of the budget presentations. And up first, we welcome Saco Main Street, and I think the presentation will be delivered by Holly Gordon and Stefan Ormantis. Welcome. For all presenters, please speak directly into the microphone.
Thank you. We were just having a little technical difficulties firing up the laptop, so thank you. And thanks to Andrew for his earlier support.
We may end up taking some multiple recesses tonight if we deal with IT problems, but
Sorry. Sure, thank you. Just firing up the PowerPoint. But while we're waiting for that, I will just start in with notes. Here we go. Connect that. There we go. There. So Saco Main Street is really, we're here to, I'm a member of Saco Main Street's board. I've been the past board president. I've been on the board for a number of years. And we're really here to serve the local downtown community. We're focused on keeping the momentum for a community that is coming out of COVID. And we're really at the heart of welcoming people down to downtown and supporting the vibrancy of the businesses that are here. 2021 was a great success, even though we had the challenges of COVID. And we all know that a vibrant downtown is really the cornerstone of a community and one that really brings the community together. So we'll go over a few of the highlights from last year that show some of the investment that the city has made into the community. We'll show some highlights about how we're making a significant difference in downtown. We've had, in 2021, 7 major events. There were 400 letters to Santa, 10 scheduled nights of live music, 9 ribbon cuttings, 10 new flower planters. You know, there's more. It really comes down to even a partridge in a pear tree. You'll see details later. But right now, I'm going to turn it over to Holly Gordon. And before I do, I just want to give a shout out to Holly. She is a heart and soul, a fantastic ambassador to Saco Main Street. And she works tremendously hard to make sure that the events go flawlessly and just is an amazing support to everyone connected with Saco Main Street. So I'm going to turn it over to her to go over some of the highlights of 2021.
Councilors, your supported entities is page 143 and 142 in your budget book.
Thank you. Most of you are pretty familiar with the events we hold on Main Street, and we managed to add a few here on your screen that you can see for 2021. We set the state record for Maine's longest banana split on Father's Day morning, and we were lucky to be joined by Lori Vornis from the Q Morning Show. Her presence and help also extended into another new event, our participation in the regionally well-known Cans for a Cure. We also worked with the Saco Parks and Recreation Department to expand our already popular music in the parking lot over the covered bridge to Jubilee Island in a limited music series on Sunday nights. You can see some of our highlights here. We had a 59% increase in revenue at the 2021 car show versus 2019. We obtained 2 new corporate sponsors for our events, one of whom is from the industrial park, and we were really happy to be able to make a contact there and potentially start opening up even more relationships. Our holiday festival and parade of lights was our longest one yet and included a new fundraiser for us, selling blinking pins and wands throughout the day and then at night during that parade. You can see some of the artist feedback on this slide, and we've heard similar feedback to what's shown here from several vendors at the Let's Arts Festival. And I want to point out that we've seen a steady increase in new. 18 of the 36 artists in 2021 were brand new to the festival, and we are already seeing it happen again, with 20 of this year's 49 applicants so far being first-year artists. We had an unprecedented 23 crafters exhibit at the Pumpkin Harvest Festival last year versus 9 in 2019. What I want to highlight to the council and hopefully have demonstrated is that we're growing in a big way, despite the world being on pause for the last 2 years. We're not only meeting, but exceeding our performances pre-pandemic, and we're showing strong signs of continuing that growth in 2022.
So just to speak to the economic vitality, this is really where the engine of downtown is, through the businesses. And as Saco Main Street, we're really trying to connect with businesses on a one-to-one relationship, determine what they need, and see how best Saco Main Street can support them, whether it's through events, whether it's actually connecting them with others. Many times they're siloed as a new business coming in. They don't understand who else might be in their ecosystem. And so we provide a link that allows them to connect and learn about upcoming events, resources, and different opportunities that they may not be aware of. As you can see, our economic vitality meeting on our notes meets monthly and provides different ad hoc information and support to merchants. And I'd say one of the biggest wins of 2021, particularly coming out of COVID, is that there were zero vacancies. We had a really successful Small Business Saturday, and just continuing to build those strong links with merchants and getting it to come together as a community. On the promotional side, our goal there is really just to keep Saco in the spotlight through our committees and events, whether it's generating buzz through the Saco Scoop. I'm still waiting for Steffa to come up as a name on the Saco Scoop, but it may be a while there. But certainly we've brought over 15,000 people to downtown that typically would not be wandering downtown, whether it's through our events, whether it's through different promotions. And then just on the earned media side, we've gotten radio spots, TV appearances, some wonderful press that continues to promote Saco in a positive light and provide something that Saco residents can really be proud of. Just from a social media standpoint, we've had more than 100,000 reaches on our posts. So there's definitely interest. There's definitely interest in finding out about what's going on in Saco. And Saco Main Street really provides that. From an organizational standpoint, we welcomed 3 new board members, which was terrific. They bring a lot of great skills to the group. We're transitioning, as you know, from an executive director. We've had our opportunity to put postings out, and we're building on that side, along with a strong board. From a partnership side, we continue to work with all of the city partners that we can, whether we're putting together events or just trying to build Saco better and do our part. So you can see some of the wins we've had there as well. Moving on to the design side, this is where we make sure there's a fresh look for Saco. People coming in, whether it's planters, banners, holiday lighting, going through the seasons, all the things that give our community a reason to come downtown, engage, and really give that sparkle and that life to a downtown. So examples of that, you can see our crosswalks. You can also see the seasonal banners that we've got, the planters. We added 10 new planters downtown. So really, as tourists are coming in, our locals, it provides a really welcoming atmosphere. And this year, our holiday lighting was also enhanced. So plenty more lights for kids to enjoy as they come down Saco Main Street. Our 2022 goals, continuing on the external side, continuing to collaborate with partner organizations. We always know that, combining forces usually provides better results, so we continue to work with organizations and businesses to promote Saco, increasing now that COVID has allowed us to be in person, continuing to increase community events within the Saco Scoop, and then continuing excellence in our existing events that are really solid, that have a great track record, and just continuing to execute and build on those. We continue to be hopeful that we can enhance the Saco River access and activities. That's really a hidden gem that we'd like to, on our short and long-term range goals, to leverage the Saco River as an opportunity for downtown to connect. And then having a downtown speaker system so that whether holidays, whether it's the Beach Boys in the summer, just encouraging people to come down, and also just from a public safety standpoint, being able to communicate with large groups in a clear way. And we're also looking to see how we can continue to integrate TA into our community and find opportunities, and that goes to some of the partnerships. On the internal side, we're looking to hire a strong ED candidate, continue to strengthen fundraising at events, grow our board using the Maine Development Foundation opportunities, and then just continuing to delegate where we can and brand. When we look at 2021 funding, the city contributed $125. And about a quarter of our entire budget was raised through sponsorships, event revenue, and scoop profit. We try to keep our pricing at our events at an accessible level. We could charge more for things like the art festival and the parade and those sorts of things, but we're really trying to get a wide, the widest participation that we can, and that costs us on the revenue side, but we feel like it enhances the breadth of who can participate in these events, particularly through COVID. Scoop is providing a hub for so many generations coming together, and it's past break even, which is fantastic. And the plans are to continue to see that grow. Our fiscal goals in 2022 are to establish the fundraising committee, adding events, and increasing revenue where we can, and holding up that balance between providing access to the entire community, but continuing to pay the bills. So finally, our continued mission at Saco Main Street is really to make it a great place to live and work and improve the vitality of our downtown. And so we're incredibly grateful for the support that the council offers and the city offers, and I'm proud to be part of it.
Thank you. Any questions? Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. Good job. I know this isn't your normal role, but I appreciated the information and the way it was laid out. I guess what I was going to say was, I mean, I support the goals of the organization, and I appreciate that, you know, you're going to have a renewed effort towards finding sponsorships, that component. The only question I had is on the 2021 funding slide. It said that the city participated at 125 or 26,000, and you might not have the answer for this. It might be the finance director. From what I looked back, I believe we were only 100,000. So I'm just curious where the difference was, and if that's what we're asking for this year, or we're still back at the 100,000.
My understanding is that the request was in at 100,000 this year, but I don't have the breadth of knowledge and but Nathan, I can dig into that and find out the answer for you.
In the administrator's budget on page 143, there is $100,000.
Yeah.
That is what is recommended in the administrator's budget.
Yes, so the 125 goes back to a mid-cycle budget amendment for fiscal year 2021, which I believe was an incremental 25,000 to support adding headcount through the transition of the executive director position.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Hatch, you had a question?
Yes, and I think it was partially answered there. So I'm just trying to get my arms around the status of the replacement of the
Sure.
executive director, and the fact that there was money put into your budget to help fund what I believe to be two positions, so one could transition into the other, that being sort of a temporary thing, and it sounds like we're back to the 100, so I guess I'm good there.
Can I would like to clarify on that, Phil, is that the role of program director and of an events person was not intended to be a temporary position. It was intended to be over time the structure that we need, because if you have an executive director, it's really a case for burnout. If you have one person, if you have that one executive director, they basically, all they have the bandwidth for is to do events. They can't do any merchant outreach. They can't go raise sponsorship dollars. They can't do the things that really bring things forward. If you have somebody that you can bring in at a lower level that's more an event coordinator, they can take care of those event pieces while you have somebody that can do those bigger picture things that really move the city forward, whether it's grant writing, whether it's, going out and raising dollars through sponsorship. But if you are, as a solo person in that there's so many, whether it's the Saco Scoop, whether it's running all those different pieces, then, it's a lot for one person. And so the initial structure was really intended to be an executive director with somebody coming in to support that.
And at the moment, it's my understanding that both of those positions are vacant,
Yes, they are.
and you're out looking to fill both of them?
Yes. Well, actually, there's a staging to it. Our strategy is to first hire the executive director, because we want to make sure that the person that we hire for executive director will come with a certain skill set. We want to balance that by having the person who comes in on the other level. If you've got somebody that's a great ideas person, usually they're not great at paperwork. If you've got somebody great at paperwork, they're not your ideas person. So you hire for the executive director first, and then you backfill with the person that can support the skills that this person may not come in at, because you won't get a unicorn every time.
And how many iterations of hiring process have you gone through? Have you gone through a couple of advertising for the, you're having a hard time filling
Well, I think part of it is honestly the salary. You're looking at a salary that has minimal benefits. So I think that first pass we did, we're putting it out again. We do have we've been seeding it in our networks and going through that. I think we've got a couple good candidates that are in the pocket. But I'll tell you, Phil, it's not easy, on the benefits and the salary that we're offering and the scope of the work that we're asking for. We're asking for somebody at a high level that can really lead Saco in not a mousy way, that's just sort of somebody that's coming in. You want somebody that's really strong, knows what they're doing, that can really be a great part of Saco Main Street and lead the community.
Well, I feel bad for you because there are many companies who have good paying positions with benefits that can't find people to fill them.
Yes.
So I feel your pain. So my point, I guess, in this discussion, I guess I'll direct it at City Administrator Cainrath, is whether or not there's any way we might consider folding the organization into the fabric of the municipality. I presume we're funding a significant portion of the costs of that organization, whether or not that would be something to sit down with staff and figure out because I would imagine it'd be easier for us with benefits to try to attract an individual. So that's just a point I want.
Could I just add to that, because that is something that we've considered? There's a significant downside to bringing somebody into the city, and that now they can't ask for sponsorships. If you're part of the city, you can't go out and ask for money, basically. So by having something on the outside where there's this supportive relationship between the two, then you have the opportunity of somebody that can really go out to some of the key businesses, and we've seen the increase in businesses coming in that might be viable options for us to go look for funding and just have that engagement. When you do engage them at a sponsorship level, then they get more connected to the community in a way. So I certainly am all ears to find a way to get a great benefits package or a great piece, but I would just hesitate in the sense of it really closes off some opportunities to be nimble in a way that that the city has some restrictions on.
And obviously, cost effectiveness or efficiency is a good thing, but the other issue is not impeding on the impact that the organization has had, and it's a good impact. So I understand what you're saying, and I just throw the concept out to the administrator as a possibility to explore. So.
No, I'm all ears on how to make this work. I am very committed to Saco Main Street, and I appreciate all that it has done in the past, and will continue to do. Anything?
Any further questions? Council Archer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is more about the budget book, so it's going to be directed to our finance director. It was identified that 126 was, we had the amendment, I get that. Just trying to make the amendment in the book, because I'm not seeing it that way. When was the money dispersed, the additional 26,000?
That's a great question, because I did the same work that you're doing right now in the budget book.
All
And
right,
I have the answer.
Or we're on the same 2 pages.
Yes, so I spoke too quickly. The amendment to support additional headcount actually occurred in fiscal year 2020. So in 2020, you'll see in the top table for supported entities, out of the general fund, 20,000. That was the amendment to support additional headcount. The TIF funding amount in 2020 was only 71,000. It appears in reviewing the detail in our financial system that Saco Main Street received some additional funds out of the Downtown Street Improvements Fund related to things like flowers, holiday lights, and some additional items. So Saco Main Street received sort of their base funding of $100,000 out of the dedicated Saco Main Street line, and then there were some additional expenditures that we sort of purchased through Saco Main Street. And I can provide the detail on those invoices if councilors would like to see that after this meeting.
Not necessarily the invoice, I'm just looking at the 40,000 foot level. It didn't make sense here, so we're good.
Any further questions for Saco Main Street? Thank you very much. Up next on budget presentations, we have Biddeford, Saco, Old Orchard Beach Transit. Welcome, Chad.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to try to set this up effectively. Getting close. Try again. So it says it's ready.
Okay, so try clicking it again.
Perfect. Thank you.
Not only good with finances, but also in IT. Thank you.
Go. All right. Good evening, everybody. For some in the room, I've worked pretty extensively with you, and for others, this is our first opportunity to be introduced, so I appreciate this chance. My name is Chad Hyde, Executive Director of BSub Transit. I've been here in my role since the end of July of 21. In advance of that, I've worked in public transit for over 15 years in Albany, New York. This is my first real foray in the state of Maine, and the real reason I came is because the momentum that this region is experiencing right now, both in their development patterns, as well as the transformation that's occurring in Biddeford, Old Orchard Beach, and Saco. Tonight's presentation is really focused on understanding the history of where BSub Transit has come from in perspective of financing and ridership, as well as the current state of financing, and then the request, obviously, this is tonight's content, and then what we're looking forward to doing over the next year. So the first slide I'll show is the last 12 years of funding. Before I get into the details, so that everybody understands, BSub Transit is a quasi-municipal agency funded equally through the three partner municipalities, Biddeford, Saco, Old Orchard Beach. The way that the bylaws are constructed, each of the three municipal partners is required to provide the same contribution. Over time, you can see that while there's not considerable trends related to the year-over-year financing, the dark line indicates the percentage increase or decrease relative to the previous year. Some years are flat funded, a few instances are actually a reduction in funding, but if you look at the totality over the last 12 years, you see that there is an incremental increase over time. While I can't speak to the policies that impacted this incremental increase, one thing that I do just need to express is BSub Transit is able to directly access multiple federal funding streams through urbanized federal formulas through the Federal Transportation Administration, which is the 5307 funds, and then also rural federal transportation funds with our 5311 funds. Depending on which line of service you're looking at or which area that our agency provides service to, we're delineating between the two. The reason I mention this right now is we are at really a transformational point in public transit. Well, infrastructure and operating monies are available at rates that have never been seen, especially in this region. If you look from last year to the upcoming fiscal year, there's going to be an increase of $5.1 million additional dollars in the 5307 formula funds. These monies are only available when there is a requisite match. For operating expenses, it requires a 50% match, $1 to $1, and for capital expenditures, it's a 20% match, $1 to every $4 of federal money. So getting to the municipal request, There's multiple lines here, and I can't really speak to my predecessor or everybody's understanding here amongst the council, but I want to express kind of the way that I understand the last few years of requests have gone. The first line is the blue line to look at, which reflects what the request was from my predecessor in January of 2020, fiscal year 2021, which was a request for $200,000. The way that I understand it, the request of $200,000 in fiscal year 2021 was going to be followed by 2 following years of increases of $20,000. So $220,000 in 2022 fiscal year and $240,000 in the upcoming fiscal year that we're approaching. Obviously, COVID hit in March of 2020, and again, the way I understand it, each of the municipalities and BSub Transit had a series of conversations and agreed that it would not be necessary at the time to fund BSub Transit at the rate of $200,000 from each of the municipalities, and instead, knowing the uncertainty being faced by each of the municipalities, the request would be $165,000. Another reason that that was tenable at the time for BSub Transit is that there was available monies to offset the lost revenues as a byproduct of fare reduction or municipal contribution reduction, cut CARES or CORRESPONDENCE money. That's the blue line. The yellow line is what has actually occurred. The reduction to $165,000 in fiscal year 21, then the planned and programmed increase to $200,000 in fiscal year 22. Now, the orange line reflects what I understand was presented in 2021, fiscal year 2022, which was the increase to $220,000 in the current fiscal year, and then the incremental $20,000 increases over the next 2 following years. So the fourth and final line is the red line, which is the actual request that we're making today, $250,000. I realize it's a lot of information, but the reason that I'm trying to provide the context is the year-over-year increase, $200,000 to $250,000, significant, 25%. But if you look at the deltas of the alternatives, or what was programmed or planned looking at preceding years, you're either looking at a delta of $10,000, looking at what the initial 2020 ask was, or $30,000 for the ask that was intended from the previous year's request. Moving off of the municipal request, providing some context of ridership, there are 2 different bars and charts here. The orange lines are the seasonal trolley ridership. You can see it was considerable pre-COVID, went down considerably in that middle area, and then is increasing, almost double last year. Understanding and expecting similar trends to follow this year, we might not reach the pinnacles of calendar 2019, but we are certainly on our way. There's also a number of potential service adjustments that we'll be making that I'll speak to later in the presentation that should enhance that ridership even more. The blue line is our fixed route ridership. There are a number of different variables that have gone into it and variables that directly impact how transit is used. A brand new transit system was rolled out in August of 19, which was the Pulse system, where all of the BSub transit services became a Pulse, a network that all came together at the Saco Transportation Center, radiating out in multiple geographic directions, as well as a shared frequency of every 75 minutes. In advance of that ridership, the monthly average was around 17,000 to 18,000 per month. You can see as you move from the August 19th period, along with the new transit system, there was a decrease in ridership. Some of that could have been seasonal, some of that could have been a byproduct of people learning a new network or losing direct access to their rides. Then COVID hit, plummet, down to April 2020, where we did not operate any service. And then the ridership began to increase again at a fairly steady clip. You'll notice that in between April, or May, and September of 2020, there was no fare. In transit, fare is the primary barrier to transit. If you pay attention to many other cities around the country, you'll notice that many of the larger cities are now offsetting fares entirely and going fare-free. Boston has certain lines that are going fare-free, Columbus, Ohio has certain lines that are going fare-free, and there are a number of other larger municipalities. Certainly not to suggest that today, but just to understand that fare can reduce ridership. Fare is one of the primary ways that we generate our revenue. And the model and the business structure of this agency is predicated on the municipal contributions as well as the fare recovery. In October of 2020, when we added fare back, we not only just resumed the old fare policy, we actually brought technology on board, this is again in advance of me, and raised the per-trip ride. You'll notice the fare slope moved downward again, headed into the second wave of COVID as well as winter seasonality. And we're slowly seeing a resumption or an increase in looking at the last quarter. Some of that is a byproduct of our increased gas rates. Some of it is a byproduct of the seasonality. We're getting warm again. But we've also made a few just minor adjustments in the beginning of February that have seen ridership increases on two of the lines that serve Saco. The green line, Route 60, which goes between Saco and Portland by way of Route 1, Old Orchard Beach, Scarborough, and Portland, or South Portland. We also made adjustments to the Silver Line, increasing frequency in February to every 15 minutes throughout most of the day, except when it goes to the UNE campus once every hour. So getting back to the topic of federal opportunities to offset fare revenues, I came into this region at the end of the region's obligation and allocations of these monies. But I want to call out for each of the city council members here and for anyone else paying attention, regionally, Greater Portland and the urbanized area that contains multiple transit providers all listed here was provided $53 million. If you look at the way those $53 million were allocated, you'll notice that it might be disproportionate. South Portland, 1.6 million. BSub Transit, 2.6 million. BSub Transit is the second largest over-the-road rubber tire transit system in the region. Yet, when you look at compared to other providers, not as much. I'll call out also Concord Coach, private provider. Almost the amount of South Portland and BSub Transit combined. The reason I call that out is I encourage each of you to understand the way that these monies were obligated, because with effective advocacy, with considerable outreach and consistent and constant communication with the folks that are leveraging these monies, there's an opportunity for us to potentially get more in the future. Certainly not CARES, that money's gone, but I think the lessons learned are important, and it's going to take each one of us to work together and each of the voices to become louder in volume amongst the larger region. And lastly, to this point, this money is going to run out in April of 23, which is the last quarter of this upcoming fiscal year, meaning that in order for this service to sustain as is or grow, which is really the intent of the region and certainly in line with the comprehensive plan that Saco is putting together, it's going to require a revenue structure that deviates from what the CARES money is, which means more money from the municipalities as well as other potential partners and shifts in the way that fare is generated. Which gets me to my last slide. Activities that are ongoing or have been undertaken over the last fiscal year. The first one is the collective bargaining agreement. My first charge, first week on the job, was to begin the process of facilitating and negotiating a labor agreement with the Amalgamated Transit Union Local 714, which is representing Bangor, Greater Portland, RTP, and now BSub Transit. After 5 months, we did structure and reach agreement with the ATU. The outcomes of that agreement included a 22% raise for operators, but was entirely sustainable within the existing budget structure. This raise was really a requirement of our workforce. As you may see across the transportation industry, it's really difficult to maintain staffing levels. Right now, BSub Transit is the only transit provider that has not reduced service in the last 3 months as a byproduct of staffing. The rates of wages for our operators is still less than Metro and other providers in the region. Also, over the last year, we've onboarded 2 brand new Proterra electric buses, which is what's pictured there. Those monies, separate from the urbanized 5307 or rural 5311 formula funds, came through discretionary grants where we partnered with GP Metro to purchase these units. Each of these federal grants also requires local match, But to my predecessor's credit and other folks at BSub Transit, we were able to work a reasonable alignment with Maine DOT to leverage Volkswagen settlement funds, which is an emission policy or emission byproduct. And the local match was entirely foot by the state, which, from a perspective of the municipal partners, I think goes a long way. Each one of these vehicles is roughly $1 million. The third bullet, diesel fuel and utility costs, I call out as a concern moving forward. Initially, all of our fleet was diesel, so we didn't really have exposure to the utility market. But now with the 2 brand new electric buses and the path that public transit is headed down, potentially more electric fleet, we have a significant exposure to the utility rates. And as all of you, I'm sure, can attest, looking at your own home utility bills, the rates have gone up considerably. And we initially, or my predecessor initially, may have posited that the investment in electric fleets was going to actually reduce overall operating costs. That's not the case today. What that means is we are leveraging and lobbying the PUC, the Public Utility Commission, as well as the utility provider themselves and the governor's office to attempt to get preferential rates or try to define policy that limits our exposure to peak rate charges. Outside of that, there's also the diesel market today, which is quite volatile. We have locked into a diesel fuel procurement for the upcoming fiscal year, which provides us cost certainty. While it's certainly not as beneficial as what has been the terms in the past, I think as an organization and as a partner or a subsidiary of each of the municipalities, I think it's important headed into the budget cycle. And you'll notice, I believe, I've mentioned that at some point in one of our letters. New technology on the fleet. So headed into 2023, BSub Transit wants to be a transit provider that enhances the livability of the community, the walkability of the community. Really looks to enhance the connection of multiple modes within your community, and a lot of that's going to require technology, real-time passenger information, enhanced transit and customer mobility signs, amongst a number of different technology options. These are capital expenditures that there are monies available in the Increase 5307 funds, but it's going to require an increase in local match. On top of that, we have over the next 3 months the plan to unveil a new HVAC technology that will ensure 99.9% of airborne pathogens, both bacteria and viral, are eliminated through the natural circulation of air on our fleet, which we hope, as we market and promote that, will increase the actual ridership along our fleet and our services. Other activities that we have ongoing and moving forward, the summer trolley season I mentioned earlier, might be a little different than years past, so more to come on that. But we're looking to enhance potential connections between Old Orchard Beach and Saco, both the entertainment and hospitality options along Route 1 and Saco, but also potential connections here to the downtown. We're undertaking a partnership consideration with Ready Seafood. Not fully baked yet, but I wanted to call it out today because it's one that, in my previous experience, I spent considerable time looking to build up relationships with private partnerships within municipalities and enhancing the existing transit network, as well as ensuring that local businesses have direct connection to employment opportunities. So whether that's residents who are living here in Saco, people who can walk to the transportation center to connect to our network, or areas along the route network to make sure that agencies like Ready Seafood have a fully staffed outfit. Again, more to come on that one. That's the preview. Lastly, there are grant opportunities. As some of you may have read, there were ARPA monies that were allocated towards the various transit providers towards a number of projects. I've spent considerable time advocating for BSub Transit to get as much of that opportunity as possible. There's potential half-fare programs where ARPA money might be supporting. There are also frequency enhancements. Frequency from a transit perspective equals more ridership, because the more frequent a bus comes, the less likely that person needs to pay attention to a specific trip, and if the trip is missed, when it's less frequent, they're less likely to take it again. So if it comes more frequent, generally, they're going to consider it more often. I like the slogan, frequency equals freedom. Lastly, some items that I didn't put in text because I didn't want to fill up the slide with too many words. I want to provide some kudos to the previous presenter, our co-leasee at Saco Transportation Center, Saco Main Street. I really appreciate and think they're doing great work, especially with the pedestrian enhancements along the intersections. I think that's a wonderful opportunity to enhance connectivity and enhance mobility options, as well as making sure that pedestrians and transit users are given a priority as opposed to vehicles. I've just recently started an engaged discussion with the BPAC, which is Bike Pedestrian Advocacy Council or Committee. I'm not sure what the C stands for there, but again, in my previous experience, the transit operator has a direct involvement in not only the transit opportunities, but also the multimodal linkages between different transit options that are not cars. I think there's some momentum there, some gravity there, and I bring this up today because I encourage more of that thought, and I'm happy to advocate for transit at those tables, but also as the council members have those types of conversations, I'm happy to be involved in those processes or just the brainstorming activities. Lastly, I just want to speak to where we expect to go over the next year or two and how that aligns very closely with the comprehensive plan that's being put together by the City of Saco. Again, livable, walkable communities, connected mobility systems, expanding economic opportunities for all. These are all direct speaking points to why transit is viable, why transit is important. And the only way that I see transit and BSub transit to be able to help reach those outcomes here in the City of Saco is with increased investment. And with that, I turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for Chad? Councilor Berman.
Yeah, thank you. A few questions and a comment. First, I guess, is a question. I'm not sure if it's for you or Finance Director Salas, but it looked like your request was for $250,000, but it looks like in our book, the administrator's budget has it listed for $200,000. I just wanted to clarify what the actual request is.
So BSOOB did request $250,000 in total, and in the city administrator's budget, $200,000 was approved. So should council wish to fully fund the request from BSOOB, that would be an amendment, which I could put together for a councilor that wishes to champion it.
But the other piece of that is, and we've had discussions, Chad knows about this, so his initial budget request, and this was, I guess unbeknownst to you, was for $250,000, and the letter outlined many operational needs. And if you'd like, we could also have Denise speak to this, but we fund this with TIF funds, and TIF funds cannot be used towards operational needs, only capital. And so that's the other piece that we're working through right now, and I think we're going to have some more discussions on that. But that was the other wrinkle here. So I think if they come up with more capital needs and more in lines with what we've used with TIF funds here, we can certainly make that change. But so 200 is in there now, but I'd say it's fluid, and if certainly we want to go to the 250 or the 240, that's certainly the purview of the council.
Did I understand the presentation correctly that there's a statute or rule that all three communities must fund at the same rate, so the decision we make then gets multiplied by 3?
Yeah, I will speak to that. That is correct. I've presented the city of Biddeford already. I'm presenting to the city of Saco tomorrow. I do not know the outcomes, obviously, where all the municipalities are early in their budget cycle. What I will recognize is, as this is my first time going through the budget cycle, I've learned that I need to do better outreach earlier into the municipal budget agenda each year. Shifting gears a little bit, there is one TIF, I believe the transit-oriented TIF here in Saco, it might be TIF number 12, that does allow for new and expanded service. Again, without getting overly committal to one or two projects, there are opportunities for expanding service in the city of Saco that might be able to be leveraged against those TIF funds.
Okay, is that the understanding of the city also, that the budget's the same for each of the three municipalities?
I am not familiar with the legal ramifications. I know that's more or less the commitment, but if
Yep,
you have
sorry.
the copy of the charter or,
It's exactly as you said. The commitment of one city will potentially dictate the outcomes of the two other cities, so that there is a multiplier effect, either positive or negative.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Yep.
Two other questions. I think you were hinting at this towards the end. There was a Portland Press Herald article 3 days ago that talked about, sounded like an enacted program that cuts BSOOB transit fares in half for the next several months using 1.1 million of federal funds. Is that happened? Is that happening? It was a little unclear.
Yeah, the money has been approved at the PACS Policy Board, which means that it has been obligated. Of that $1.1 million, $90,000 is going to be subtransit. The vast majority is going to Metro, South Portland, and Casco Bay lines to the tune of $930,000, give or take $50,000. But a considerable component of that is Metro and Portland-centric obligations. How it is programmed and actually implemented is yet to be determined. This is all kind of recent news and outcomes.
Yeah, thank you. And then maybe more of a comment, but the BPAC is indeed very excited to collaborate with transits and has grand visions for large programs involving bike share programs and rentals, linking the UNE campus, Biddeford, Saco, Old Orchard Beach, and bike racks on the front of buses could play an integral part in making that bike share program work and ensuring compatibility and transit all along those lines. So certainly, personally, hope things like that come to fruition. I think would be a great addition to making our community livable. And then my final question, I think, is for Finance Director Salas, but I noticed that the BSOB Transit is not part of the pie chart on page 143 either, even though it looks like they have maybe double the allocation to Saco Main Street, which just might be helpful for me to understand kind of their overall part of the supported entities fund.
yes, I did identify after the book had been printed that the charts on this particular page were not updated. So I can update those, and the digital copy at least will have the correct visualizations. My apologies on that.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Councilor Hatch.
Thank you, Mayor Doyle. Just a comment, I have the privilege of serving as council liaison to Transit, and I have to tell you, it's one of my favorites, and it's one of my favorites because of the gentleman that's standing before us. The business guy in me, when I go to these meetings, I get really charged. He's on top of things. He's working real hard to work with what I've come to realize is a very credible staff of folks at Transit. They work hard to squeeze every dollar they can out of every place they can find it. And I think that as I look at the comments that he's made tonight, I have a lot of confidence that Chad and his crew are going to be able to maximize the efficiency and utility of the money that we allocate to them. So I just wanted to get that on the record.
Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. Along those same lines, I mean, I don't know you. This is the first time I've had the privilege of you presenting, but I'm very pleased with what I've heard from you. I've lived in the downtown my whole life, and I've watched for years the bus system not be adequately used. And so it's kind of refreshing to have a presentation where, you seem to have a plan in place that will get ridership, well above where it was pre-COVID. So I thank you for that, and I look forward to working with you.
Councilor Archer.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Are we still running that pilot program, I don't want to say free, but you called it, not reduced fare, but no fare, I'll call it. Are we still running that loop, or whatever we're calling it?
Yep.
And how is that going?
That is the Route 54, the Silver Line, the downtown circulator. That's what I was mentioning earlier.
Okay.
In advance of the changes on February 6th, where the schedule was variable with alternating trips between the downtown circulation and then headed down to the UNE campus, it wasn't great. There are multiple variables to consider. Generally, it takes a while for people to adapt new transit plans with new transit options. Also the wintertime. Also potential generators along that circulation maybe haven't really come to fruition, especially in the Pearl Street, Lincoln Street developments on the Biddeford side. Once we made the adjustments, we had, so enhanced trips per day, I think it was from 16 to 26 trips per day, more regularly defined frequencies. The ridership has gone up. Again, we don't know if that's because of the schedule change or because it's improved in weather conditions and there's more activity generally day to day. But it's beginning to work. I would suggest, putting my planner hat on, that's what I did for many years. It's always important to measure and evaluate and adjust and iterate and not set yourself to one plan forever. So I can't say that we'd be married to the existing routing moving forward, but at the base level, it is showing ridership enhancements and increases day over day.
Thank you. And then just a clarification question with the shared municipal monies that we give to you. It was my understanding it was more of the lowest common denominator, the lowest of the three budgets. I believe they've always been in a line. I don't think we've ever had that issue. But it wasn't that one city could just give $1 million and it forced Old Orchard and Biddeford to do $1 million as well.
No, yeah,
I believe it was the lowest common. So whatever we approve, if we amend, I'm not sure what you're asking with the other communities or what their conversations are, but amendments should be discussed with those other communities if you're trying to get higher than what is originally proposed by each municipality. So that's more of a strategy thing rather than to anybody who makes an amendment.
If I could just respond to that. Yes, I believe your interpretation is correct. My first time going through this, I am learning on the fly to a degree. We have made the same request of each of the municipalities, $250,000 each. That's where we stand.
Any further questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you all. I appreciate it. You have a nice night.
Up next, we're going to hear from Water Resource Recovery Department Director Howard Carter. So the Water Resource Recovery Department is on page 235, starts on 235 for counselors.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thanks for having me on a glorious Budget Monday. I'll do mine a little bit different. It'll be more interactive. If you have a question along the way, just ask. Most of you folks know, and for folks at home, we do operate WRRD on an enterprise fund, which is a separate entity than the general fund. So we try not to intermingle those funds at all. And most of our decisions are made around what we call the triple bottom line. That's the social aspect of it, would be the protection of human health and recreational and values. The economic piece of it, which would be like economic development, jobs, and of course the environmental aspect of it. So for a quick year in review, we're now up to 4887 customers. That's a little tick up. We're up to 399 commercial accounts. Last year, the average quarterly sewer bill was $93.72. That was down a little bit, actually, from the year before. We equate that more to people going back to work, not being home so much because of the COVID effect. And with that, our sewer abatements actually went down a little bit to $240,000. Now, for you folks that don't know, that's the water meter reads that get called in every year. We treated just under 800 million gallons a day of water, and we produced 2,311 tons of biosolids. Some of our highlights for last year, the facility was awarded the Water Resource Utility of the Future Today Award. That's an award that's given out by the US EPA, the Water Environment Federation, and the North American Clean Water Association. Very prestigious award, and we're happy to receive that. We were featured across the country by the US EPA on a case study for our workforce development program. And as many of you know, we hosted the US EPA administrator this past fall. I think it's the first time he's ever been to Maine. I don't think the last time he was here was a number of years ago in Boston, because it was another individual. We were selected and approved for $3.93 million of congressionally spending. We got that through Senator King and Senator Collins' office. And as of Friday, we were selected for another $1 million from the Maine DEP for the Clean Water SRF program. So that's hard money to get. And also, as you know, we approved the local bond question for $50 million to upgrade the facility. We did a major revision to the sewer ordinance that you all voted on last year. And we had some staff graduations from Management Candidate School. That's a young man, Riley Cobb, one of our lead operators, and Emily Cole Prescott actually went to a National Water Leadership Institute. She attended this past year. Fiscal year proposed budget, you can see that. Yes, we have a huge rate increase. And most of that is going to the bond payment. That's going to be 12.5% of our budget. Base pays are regulated. Contracts are up. What's mostly, we'll touch on that, is for biosolids disposal, mostly around the PFAS legislation. Benefits are self-explanatory: capital, utilities, and the remaining categories, basic O&M costs. So let's get to the meat of it. We're projected our current user rate is going to go from $5.21 per hundred to $6.25 per hundred. So a typical family of four, that'll mean about $6 a month rate increase. So instead of looking at $30 a month, like the cost of a single cell phone, you might be up around $36. Now, that may drop because typically when water or sewer rates go up, people tend to use less water to try to balance it out, and that holds, and it tends to go back up eventually. Chemical costs are up 50%. A lot of that is sodium hypochlorite, the bleach, like people use in the swimming pools we disinfect with. That alone went up $22,000 last year. Electricity rates, we're projected to go at 30%. We hope that doesn't come to pass, but we're certainly going to be ready for it. And the biosolids disposal increased by 110%. I'm going to touch on that a little bit more. It was a perfect storm for us. We had a contract with Casella that actually expires in July. There's 13 of us communities all banded together, put out a bid for all the different contracts. We went from like $78 a ton to up to $135 a ton with Casella. They have not executed those contracts, so we got back together late last week. I think it was Thursday. We all got Casella on the phone. They said, we're not ordering them contracts. We could go up another $50 to $80 a ton on what I have on the budget right here. Just depending on the legislation now on the PFAS. No longer, they don't want you to be able to compost. They don't want you to be able to landfill it. You know, we've got to do something with it. And they're not permitting any new landfills. So Brian and I talked about that Thursday. We decided to go probably with a company out of New Hampshire for $165 a ton to cut the losses for a 5-year contract and go to Canada with it. They're going to use it to fill in asbestos mines. So we had to take a roll there. What's going to be the bird in hand? So even at those costs, this is what we're going to have projected going forward for the next 5 years. How do we rate with our neighboring communities? Well, with this rate increase, that's going to put us just below average at $6.25. But I should make you aware that we don't know what these other communities are going up for rate increases. Certainly, the biosolids disposal is going to affect them. I think Biddeford, their bond question probably kicks in this year. Kennebunk's looking at a big, huge upgrade. So I don't think any of those are going to stay static for very long. Some of the goals for this year: complete the engineering design for the water resource recovery project. That is going a little bit slower than planned. Cost increases have gone up like 20% since we started doing that bond, so we'll keep going back and cutting and cutting and cutting until we can't really cut too much more. So with that, we will probably go with a construction manager at risk. I'll update you that once we're through 30% design, but with that, what that really does is you put out an RFP for a contractor. They work with us and the engineering firm to help design the final aspect of the project, and they'll give you a guaranteed price of what that contract's going to be. And then maybe we can see if we can value engineer back from there. For a typical design bid build, you design it, put it out to bid, and hope you come in with your right price. But the way construction is now, you know, we'd be rolling the dice, I think. So the SRF program's on par with that. That's happening more and more in the state of Maine, so we'll see some more of that. And our ongoing maintenance for the sewer systems and 30 pump stations. I'm sure you guys are all enjoying the work going on Elm Street today. So, that's just one. That's a brick sewer from the 1800s. We don't really know what's going on under there, so what you don't know, it was an old brick sewer that runs right down through there. We can't get the camera through it, so we have to put what they call dog houses on. You take a manhole structure, you concave it so it sits over the brick, pour cement all around it, and bust the brick out so you can get in there and see what you're doing. And then we'll pull a liner through it, harden it. And we were going to spread that out over the summer, but the way the traffic is, we're just going to get it all done right now and be done with it. Because better now than later. And that's basically it in a nutshell. Some different slides, but open to questions.
Questions for Director Carter? No questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, folks.
Up next, we will hear from Economic Development, Director Clavette.
Bear with me because technology is not my forte, but I have Glennis here to save me if I can't figure this out. All right, let's open this up. Not working. Let's see if that works. Oh, there we go. I just needed Glennis to stand up, and then it would make it all work for me. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Doyle, members of the City Council, City Administrator Brian Cainrath, and also thank you, Glennis, for all of her work. TIF budgeting is not for the faint of heart for any community. We are probably one of the envies of most of York County, if not all of Cumberland, for having as much TIF availability for funding that we can shift our operational general fund expenditures to. So with that, I'd like to get started. So I wrote a staff of two, a team of many, because we are just a staff of two, but we rely on many, many city staff, many departments, many individuals, developers, folks that will just knock on our door and say, someone's just walked in my door. Just most recently, it was the Saco drive-in issue. Somebody had already come in to see codes and already been to planning. We helped them work out what seemed to be one of the issues that was of high visibility. But at any rate, we strive to provide a high quality of life for Saco residents. By doing that, we do it with sustainable economy, offering opportunity for rewarding employment and prosperous businesses. We strive to be very responsive to businesses and entrepreneurs in Saco and to those looking to establish, expand, or relocate brand new businesses here in Saco. We want to make sure that we ensure access to resources and infrastructure to successfully operate in highly competitive global markets, and we worked with assisting businesses through development approval processes. So let me just do this here, the check marks. So we tie in directly with 6 of the adopted council focus areas, primarily financial stability, schools and infrastructure, economic opportunity, growth and innovation, and livable community and environmental sustainability. So some of the highlights, and I wrote this because when people get in the pipeline for business development, they start, they contact, they begin, and it flows from one fiscal year into the next and goes into the following year. So in this particular case, started in FY21, wrapped up in FY22, A2E Pile, Dock and Doors wrapping up their expansion, Maine Molecular wrapping up their expansion, Everest Recovery opened, and some of you folks were part of their ribbon cutting. Unwind Cocktail moved in and reopened a pandemic closed business on Main Street, but they came back. Chase Bank opened up, and the Old Orchard Beach Campground is expanding in Old Orchard Beach, but also into the Saco area. Lucky Lou's Prep Kitchen, just recent, in De La Torre, and new businesses slated for FY23, Chipotle, Cumberland Farms, Pete's RV, Aquaboggan, adding the Saco Drive-In, and Hale Trailer. Unfortunately, just as of recent, one of the ones that I put in the budget book was the opening of Richetta's, but I have recently learned that that is on the market. So we do have some situations that don't always succeed, and so it's unfortunate. What are our key achievements? We developed a downtown facade grant program, and proud to say Peg Pool and State Farm Insurance was the first recipient. Very, very nicely done. We have 2 in the pipeline. We dispersed almost $200,000 in loans and forgivable grants. So if the business stays in Saco, $100,000 of that will be forgiven, and we will get back the $100,000 toward another loan program. Our market analysis is completed. Our downtown streetscape improvements have begun. We replaced all of the holiday lighting through the TIF funding, planners, and there's more to come. We've been responsive to many new business inquiries and expansions. We've successfully marketed 14 and 16 Phillips Spring Road parcels, and both are under contract and anticipated to close at the end of August. And the city saved over $100,000 in broker fees by going through an RFP process. The downtown parking study, which you adopted this evening, draft was presented to council, and then the transit-oriented TIF district was completed this year. So let's talk a little bit about TIFs before I get into the budget. I labeled this because I used to always say demystifying, but I'm calling it debunking, demystifying, and setting the tone, because a lot of people say, okay, what's in it for me with TIFs? So did you know that in Saco, for every new tax dollar, not just TIFs, every new tax dollar generated, that 49 cents of each does not stay local? That's essentially 49%. That of that 49% of the lost tax dollars, 38% is represented in a reduction in state aid to education. Did you know that 2% of those lost tax dollars is due to an increase in county taxes? And that 9% of lost tax dollars is due to reduction in state revenue sharing. But here's the good news. Did you know that Saco can shelter their new growth valuation through TIF districts? And when you do that, if you lose almost 50%, that it takes twice as much from the general fund to fund TIF-eligible projects, operations, and salaries. So and the reason why I say that is because folks would sit there and say, well, it's easier to put in the general fund. But if you have TIF-eligible projects, which we do here in Saco, it behooves you to put as much of it in TIFs because you get what I call the twofer, right? You get 2 for 1. So, or 49 cents, but that's close enough. That's my simple math. Not close enough for auditing, but close enough for simple math. So I put our fancy dollar, and this is coined by Bernstein Schur, Shauna Cook-Mueller. So the little colored dollar, it just does show you, and we did the recent calculations this week to make sure we were up to date, 49%. So state aid to education gets reduced by 38%, county taxes go up by 2%, and state revenue sharing goes down by 9%. So when you start thinking about this, TIFs can't fund schools, right? It just can't. But it is funding schools because if your valuation is down, you get that much more state aid to education. You get that much more revenue sharing. And so it's like You're paying out of one pot, but you're really helping the schools out at the end for that amount of money. I want you to keep in mind, that folks that get concerned about how much is going in TIFs, keep in mind that we're not anywhere near the max. You can only have up to 5% of your total valuation in a TIF and 5% of acreage. So it's really, really a small number. I mean, you're going to see a $4.5 million budget. You'll think, ouch, that's a lot of money. But it really isn't in the grand scheme of things. So, but it can do so much. So again, I'm not going to go over this slide, but I just pulled this out of our TIF, demystifying TIF slide. It explains to you a little bit more of what I said in more technical fashion. And again, this is just to show you the TIF in effect. So the orange part of this slide shows you what you can actually shelter. In other words, the state basically doesn't know you have it. So from a revenue sharing point of view, it's all tucked away, nice and neat, and you can actually claim all of that money in your local TIF funds. So we have 10 districts here. We closed out General Dynamics about 1.5 years ago, and we added Ready Seafood and added Transit-Oriented TIF District this past year. So you have 10 actives. So how do TIFs help us in Saco? They pay for qualified TIF development program items, fund economic development salaries and operations, fund infrastructure, roads, sidewalks, capital, and bond debt, fund a portion of debt service for water resource recovery treatment plant upgrades, invest in our downtown, and fund prorated costs of public safety. And I say fire because some communities, public safety is both police and fire. TIFs can only fund fire and not police. So let's talk about our budget. So instead of putting a screen with a lot of columns and all the really, really minor, small detailed budget items that are in your budget book, I decided to put it all together and summarize it in programmatic elements so you would understand what you are investing in when you spend your TIF dollars. In economic development, and I'll break it down even further, but economic development, there's an investment of $748,552. When you look at roads, sidewalks, infrastructure, capital, $1.458167 million is invested in Saco out of the TIFs. So if you did the simple math, that would be 1.5, basically would take you $3 million in general fund money to be able to capitalize on that. So the wastewater, the 963 reflects $800,000 toward the new bond, and the 163,625 is toward the former bond. 813 is in the downtown. That includes Saco Main Street funding and includes all the other investments, and I'll show how that's broken down. Public safety is 300,000, and supported entities is 222. So economic development department salary and operations is 268,318. Business support in the form of grants, loan programs, and other detailed is 300,000. And then the prorated salaries of administration, finance, planning, and assessing comes out to 180. So you are funding basically $748,000 toward economic development directly. In the infrastructure, roads, and capital projects, roads, the bond payment, that's a continuing annualized payment of 110. Route 112 improvements, you folks did a budget amendment last year for 150. This is the second tranche for that. And then the Route 1 sidewalks signal, I put Funtown. It's not necessarily just Funtown, but that's entire area. That'll be funded to the tune of $350,000 toward that project. Wayfinding is $100,000. And then the PAX local match, which used to reside on the other side of the equation, general fund equation, is now being funded here. And then the balance of, let me see if I can get the slide to go here. The infrastructure road improvements of $140,000. Paving budget, the prorated portion of the paving budget, and I believe, Glenn, I think we're going to annualize this pretty much. So that's $300,000 that's going to shift completely from the general fund into here. And I guess I love to say, just remember, it would take you $600,000 on that side rather than the $300 out of here. City equipment lease prorated is $44,170, and the road drainage, again, prorated is $27,750. Let me just see. And a collective road safety improvements, again, that's $50,000. Sidewalk budget, $25,000. Route 1 sidewalk payment of $25,000 gets you to the tune of $1.458 million out of that. The wastewater treatment plant, I generalized that a while ago. The existing bond payment right now prorated, and that's an annualized that gets paid every year now, $163,625. And the new bond payment, we did a projection. We hired an attorney to make sure we were all set with that. And then Glennis and I worked through the numbers, and we can find out a TIS for the duration of the bond, minus 3 or 4 years, to the tune of $800,000. But that's like 26, 27 years out. I'm probably not going to be here. I may be here, but I'm not going to be here. So that is $963,000 toward water resource recovery. So the downtown investments. So I know that some folks have been concerned about, downtown didn't make it in the top 9, 10, 11, 12 goals, or made it in the 11th and not the top 9. You are investing in your downtown. Even if it's not on paper looking like that, you're doing it. You're investing $100,000 in Saco Main Street funding. We're putting this year another $100,000 in the streetscapes. With the XIII project, they're going to be doing their final phase, so we'll be paying the last tranche of their commitment. Lincoln Street sidewalk of $48,000, putting in $200,000 on the downtown business grant program, and then downtown infrastructure, roads and sidewalks, another $150,000. So you're investing $813 right here in the downtown. Public safety, the fire ladder truck, prorated amount, $100,000 is earmarked, and the fire radio prorated earmark of $200 to the tune of $300,000 for public safety. Supported entities, transit, $200,000, and the Chamber and Southern Maine Finance Agency for a grand total of $222,000. So our economic development projects and goals for this coming year is to reinvigorate our outreach and visitation. We started that in earnest, and COVID hit, and so it became problematic, and so we're going to begin this in earnest in May. Formalize our business retention and expansion project, work on getting more community development and grants. We had a business come in Friday, met with them, and they're looking at locating here in Saco, and there would be a need of a community development block grant, which we haven't had many people ask for that. In fact, they didn't know about it. We basically suggested with their specialized equipment, they would be a good qualifier. We provide ongoing business support, and then the wayfinding project, we anticipate to get that started, we're starting it. The RFP will be issued in the next couple of weeks, and we anticipate hiring a design build firm, so we're not stuck with the design on one end and trying to find somebody to do the construction and installation. In earnest, we'll begin our market analysis implementation and the downtown parking strategy implementation, and get working on implementing the comp plan from the economic development perspective. And that's it. And if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them to the best of my ability.
Thank you. Any questions for Director Clavette? Don't see any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Up next, we will hear from the Clerk Department, and that is City Clerk Michelle Hughes. That is page 66 in the budget book, 66. Okay, it's almost 8 o'clock. Why don't we take a 5-minute recess? 5-minute recess. Okay, welcome back.
Good evening, Mayor Doyle, councilors. So some of the highlights to the present are under the elections category. We've had various petitions coming through the office, and we've certified 2,387 signatures. We've also had 6,491 voter registration updates. Under the licensing category, we're at 1,196 online dog registrations, and I will note that the finance department actually processes all the in-house dog licenses, so that's actually not listed here. We've issued 2,355 various licenses, permits, and certificates. Under the records category, we've processed 35 Freedom of Access Act requests, as well as recorded 130 birth certificates, 144 marriage licenses, and 181 death certificates. Under the general assistance category, we've processed 46 applications, which assisted 104 residents. The fiscal '22 achievements fell under the quality service category, and we started with the November '21 election. We had a 33% turnout for that election and issued 2,056 absentee ballots. I completed a review of the 12 city ordinances that pertain to city clerk functions, just to make sure that they still reflect current standards, and they did. The only recommendation that I'm making is under the entertainment chapter, the fees need to be increased a little bit just for the legal ads. Right now, we're currently charging $40, and it reflects more closer to $100. So you will see that coming up later with the fee schedule. I created a standard operation procedures manual for general assistance payments and reporting. This kind of walks a person through the Munis financial software program. It shows them how to go in to look at their budget, how to run reports, pay bills, and also how to do the state report through the general assistance portal. A few years back, I had done a genealogy reference handbook. So I did go through that recently just to make sure that nothing had changed and that everything was still up to date on that. We actually added in 31 additional resources. So now it includes local, state, New England, national, and international resources. We also created a Vital Records electronic index database, and 83% of the records have been entered to date. We also implemented a paperless election petition retention system. Currently, the state law only requires us to keep copies of petitions where there is suspected fraud. The Secretary of State's office, though, prefers that we keep copies of all elections, just in case they need to, if they have a question on like certification, they can reference back to that. So we do keep those for 2 years, and it has gone electronic now. And the last thing is that I'm currently working on evaluating the municipal ward boundary lines. The anticipated completion date of that is for June, and that will be in time for the petition process this summer for the local candidates. The city clerk's budget covers the city clerk's office, voter registration, as well as the general assistance department. Currently, we're at 2.5 full-time equivalent employees. This past fall, we had the deputy registrar who left to go on to a different job. So the deputy city clerk has assumed those duties. So we currently have the city clerk myself, and I'm also the registrar of voters, the deputy city clerk and deputy registrar of voters, and the general assistance administrator. Occasionally, you may see an additional employee in our office. That is our assistant city clerk. She works on an as-needed basis, basically pre-election, post-election activities. She also assists with some licensing, covers for vacations and trainings, things like that. So her category actually falls under the temporary seasonal wage line. The current budget is $362,588 for the maintenance of effort. I've asked for $1,000 additional, so that's bring the administrative budget up to $363,588. Some of the departmental goals for next year include having the draft council minutes prepared and distributed to council for review within 5 days. Under the permanent records, deeds, easements, contracts, to have those filed into record storage within 2 days of receipt. And under the voter registration category, to have the voter cards scanned and entered into the system within 2 days of receipt. The only exception to this would be, of course, at election time. That's when we have like a couple hundred, and it's going to take a little longer to do that. So this ties in with the council's strategic goals of governance and organizational excellence. The only budget increase that I've requested is for the E-Code 360. I've requested an additional $1,000 to cover the cost of codification of new and amended ordinances. And that's it.
Thank you. Any questions for Clerk Hughes? Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
And Michelle, if you don't mind, I just want to say a small piece about general assistance, what we're doing there right now. So our general assistance administrator, and the reason why Michelle is currently filling this role, did recently retire. We have tried through several rounds to recruit a candidate without much success. So a common denominator you're going to keep hearing about, and a common theme I think you'll hear about, is recruiting is tough right now for many positions. It is very tough finding people. So we did have some talks with a third party and potentially looking at a contract for services that had a firm with some background in that sort of outreach, professionals in the field. It looks like that will be cost prohibitive, so we are now potentially exploring a partnership and sharing agreement with a neighboring community. So we're currently discussing these things now, but Michelle is filling the role currently, but I just wanted to give you an update on where that stands. But recruiting is very tough, so we're looking at other options, and I think we'll have something more permanent in the near future. But just something to keep in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle, for stepping up and wearing multiple hats. Up next, we will hear from Code Enforcement, and that is page 73 in the budget book, and we'll hear from Director Toomey.
There we go. Good evening, councilors, mayor. I'm David Toomey, Director of Code Enforcement. Basically, we had a very busy year, trying to keep our great service we have, but it's trying at times, but I think we've achieved that. And so let's get some numbers. So, multifamily dwelling units inspected, we didn't do any again this year because of COVID. Hopefully, it's looking like we've gone around the bend, so that will start up in the fall. We did 872 inspections. Oh, sorry, that was last year. 1988. It's up from 1872. We did 1,562 permits for construction, up from 1,506. We brought in $43 million. Basically, last year was $56 million. Most of the decrease is in commercial construction. That has kind of slowed down a little bit. It's probably due to labor force. They're having troubles keeping people, so all projects are taking longer. Residential, same thing, but there's not as much of an impact as the commercial. We do have a bunch through planning, and some have started site plan, so if we get those permits, it should bring the money back up, but you can never predict the future. Because COVID is not as bad, our complaints that we reported are at 85 is up from 71. Resolutions to complaints or talking to is from 84 to 131. That's basically anybody we had to talk to for more than 15 minutes on the phone or go back and talk to them again. And we've answered a lot of complaints, answered people's questions so they didn't go any further in less than 15. Those didn't get counted. We actually have 5.5 staff, up from 5. Actually, it was 4.5. We replaced a person who left. And plan review is 476, up from 351. So we have a small staff. We've been quite busy, but we're keeping ahead of it and making our service very well. So even though we had another year of COVID, which has really affected our department in different ways, and we're trying to adapt to it, construction activity is still high, and we still kept our level of service. We're known from around the area as one of the better communities as far as that goes. We still conduct all inspections in person. Even though COVID has come out, we haven't lost any days for the inspectors to go out. I'm the only one who had it. So we did issue a record number of permits, down slightly on the building, but higher on the electrical. So we're still out there issuing permits. And we filled a vacated position, and we changed the job description because we found that we needed more in-office work because the paperwork is burying us deep. People are not coming to the office like they used to. Everybody's used to working at home, so they call the office and ask all the questions. They don't come in and look at the files. So we're spending a lot more time retrieving files and answering questions than we ever did before. It's just the way that COVID has changed the world. Our budget is basically base pay. It doesn't change year from year. So we just pretty steady along that. No big changes. I'm not asking for anything. Just the same as we have every year. So it's pretty straightforward there. So we're hoping to start the MDU inspections shut down due to COVID. We are still continuing to expand interdepartmental communications. Basically, everything we do affects other departments. We're using a software program called iWorks that we're finding more and more stuff we can use. If we issue a permit, it goes out to all the other departments so they can interact, for Public Works, for driveway, police department for addressing and stuff like that. So everybody knows what we're doing when we issue a permit. So that's part of the software that we've explored to get what they call workflow. Our next step is trying to have more people do online permits, because if they do it online, it goes directly into the system. We don't have to manually enter it. I was going to do it all at once, but I think we're going to phase it in because we're just too busy to do it all at once. We will start with something at the desk. If they come in, they'll do it online. If they can't, because they don't know how, we'll give them the paper copy, but we'll phase it in. And over time, all our permits will be done online. So that will help for our paperwork in the office. We used to catch up on our paperwork in the winter. Winters don't slow anymore like they used to be. We don't have as much snow, warmer weather, I don't know, but it never slows down anymore. And basically, that's same as exploring more ways to be more efficient. That's what I just talked about as far as trying to get them to do everything online. So hopefully we have another busy year. I don't see any changes. So you never know. I was in the construction industry. You're always waiting for the shoe to drop, but I thought it was going to drop when COVID started, and we got busier. In that first month of COVID, we issued more permits for swimming pools, decks, and sheds because everybody was home. So we did have an increase in residential construction this year because there's no houses on the market. So, and that's it for my presentation because it's pretty basic.
Thank you. Any questions for Director Toomey? Councilor Hatch.
Thank you, Mayor Doyle. David, that last point I just want to extrapolate on, and with the supply and demand issues going on in the market for residential housing. My only concern is for you and your department is if there is a wave of large developments, large requests. We got a couple pieces of property in town that are percolating as we speak. What impact is that going to have on your staff if you're already, trying to be as efficient as you can? Is there a lot of excess capacity to handle this? Or?
Not at this point.
I didn't think so.
Next year might be different. I may be asking for more, but I think we can make it at this point.
Okay.
The MDUs that we start in the fall, that will kind of tell me if we're in trouble or not. And plus, you never know if it's going to drop off. I don't think it will, but at this point, I think we can handle it. But yes, the paperwork is still piling up.
Yeah.
So.
And I think that's a good comment to make is next year we may be looking at a whole different situation.
Yep, and we did do a project this year that we won't have to do it for another 5 years, thank God. It's called CRS, Community Rating Service. My project coordinator, Will Rankin, helped me out on that a lot, which saved everybody in the city in the flood zone. We kept it at 10% discount because all the paperwork we had to give to the government for that. So that took quite a lot of our time. So hopefully this year we won't have to do that because it's only every 5 years, but it's quite a project.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Director Toomey? Dave, in the past, you've come to council and talked about the need for a full-time electrical inspector, but I see you have not asked for that in this year's budget. Are we still under the need for a full-time electrical inspector?
Not so much because our last inspector we hired is also a master electrician, so he can cover. That makes a lot of difference. So I think we got the electrician part covered. But it's the other work that's may go beyond what we can handle at this point. But we're going to keep doing what we can so we don't have to have personnel, but we'll know in the fall.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And that completes budget presentations for this evening. There is no new business, so I'll turn it over to City Administrator Kainrath for the administrative update.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There is a call out for York County Budget Committee members. If you're interested in serving on the York County Budget Committee, please see the attached notice. I know there are several vacancies. An upcoming preview of our future agendas. On April 11th, we'll have more budget presentations. There will also be an executive session. On the 25th, we will have additional budget presentations and also a presentation and some points to consider on Chapter 186. On May 2nd is, of course, our budget public hearing, and we'll have an additional executive session. The additional meetings in May, there are several issues that many of you are aware of that are pending. We'll be having an agenda item on contract zoning. We'll also have a joint meeting with the planning board, which would be another great opportunity to discuss some of the planning issues as well as contract zones. We're also going to have a discussion on proposed charter amendments. So if you have any ideas for charter amendments, please email those to me or Tori in our office. I'd like to welcome one new employee to our organization. Formally welcome Mark Durgan to our Parks and Recreation Department. Mark was recently hired as the position of Parks Maintainer and Truck Driver. So welcome, Mark, and we wish him much success with the city in the years to come. Also for employees, there will be an employee lunch on April 26th from 12 to 1 at the Jubilee Island Park, and Director Summer will be briefly speaking about the park, its history, and some plans that the department has for the future there. Lunch will not be provided, so please bring your lunch, but we'll provide blankets for you to sit on at the park. Just wait for that employee barbecue later in the year, okay? Lastly, there are still two city RFP opportunities, just folks should be aware of, on the Collections Agency and also the Community Satisfaction Survey. If you have interest in those, please contact the requisite departments there. Thank you.
Any questions for City Administrator Canrath? Okay, moving on. Any council discussion and comment this evening? No council discussion and comment this evening, no executive session. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Councilor Hatch, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Berman. Any discussion on adjourning? Roll call to adjourn. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0 to adjourn at 8:27 PM. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.